Alright, let's keep the DC Universe talk going. And it's a perfect lead in to what I was going to talk about. They actually just announced that they're going to be calling this era the Superman saga, with Superman kicking off the DCU. And this is going to lead right into the video that I was going to talk about. So, I really want Brainiac. We all want Brainiac. James Gunn has just said he wants to use Brainiac for a sequel, or at least he has teased Brainiac in the second film. I'm pretty sure it's been greenlit. There's going to be a sequel, obviously. Hopefully it is a direct sequel and not some hodgepodge mess of a movie, like when they followed up Man of Steel with Batman v Superman. I think they're going to do it the right way. Now, Brainiac. We have to be very careful with how we're addressing Brainiac in this universe. Okay, this guy is he's literally a super genius. He's got like a 5th level intellect. I mean, basically, in the DC comics, he is like the most intelligent being in the universe. He doesn't see himself too much as a villain. He just wants to obtain knowledge because he knows that knowledge is power. He can defeat people that are physically stronger and more powerful than he is because he's just so intelligent. He was able to invent a shrinking ray, and he shrunk the city of, I believe it's Kandor, which is like a Kryptonian city. He was able to shrink that city. He basically put them in like a dome, and he keeps them, on his ship. If you've seen some of the animated films or some of the comics, it's kind of like a recurring thing with Brainiac. The guy's super intelligent. So we gotta be very comic book accurate with how we portray this guy. He is an incredibly amazing being in terms of his intellect. He's basically a organic life form, but he's so smart. He's created technology that he can integrate his own biology into. He can control technology. He's telepathic. He can shoot energy blasts. He can become very strong, durable. He can create all types of technology. So he's a very important villain to Superman and the DC universe as a whole. So, hopefully we get this done right, because, how long have we wanted Brainiac in a Superman film? We've never had him, in a Superman film. Ever since 1978, all the way up to 2025, we have never seen Brainiac in a live-action film. Isn't that crazy? We've seen Doomsday, but we haven't seen Brainiac. We've seen Darkseid, for crying out loud, but we haven't even seen Brainiac. Not one time, not one glimpse of Brainiac. No, not even in Superman Returns. Nothing to allude that Brainiac would be coming in a potential sequel, even though we all know that Superman Returns never got a sequel. But come on, nothing, no Easter eggs, no hints, no cameos, nothing of the sort. So it's to me, I feel like that is a crime. I feel like that's a crime to not actually include Brainiac in any DC films that are Superman related, because he's such an integral part to DC Comics, as well as an adversary to the Man of Steel. So I believe it's an injustice that we've never seen Brainiac, but maybe it was all for the best, because maybe with Gunn, he's going to do the best version possible, and maybe in those other films it wouldn't have worked too well. Again, if we're talking the original 4 films, probably wouldn't have worked, with this guy being such a technologically advanced person, with all his machines and weapons. The special effects wouldn't be up to par with like the abilities that this guy has. So first four film, probably wouldn't work at all. And then, the reboot, Superman Returns, we got Lex Luthor again, right? It's like, okay, I understand he's his arch nemesis, but can we do something besides Lex? And Lex he wanted to create land, because land is something that nobody was producing, right? I mean, there's only so much land to go around, right? That was the whole point, and he wanted to use kryptonite to like make land. Okay, so first Superman film, Lex Luthor wants to blow up California so it can sink into the Pacific Ocean, and then he can build fancy buildings and get rich. Second film wants to have more land and get rich, kryptonite land. And then we got Man of Steel, and we got General Zod, which was great. But General Zod was a villain in Superman 2, so it wasn't anything new necessarily. And then in Superman 2025, we get Lex Luthor again wanting to kill Superman. And by the way, we also got Lex Luthor in Batman v Superman, which is not a Superman film. I don't know what that film is. I don't know if it's a Batman film or it's not a Superman film, that's for sure. I actually consider it more of like a Batman film, to be honest. But we got Lex Luthor again. The worst iteration of Lex Luthor, might I add. But anyway, we got Lex again. So, again, Superman, 1978, Lex Luthor. We got a reboot, Superman Returns, Lex Luthor. In the DCEU, Lex Luthor and Batman v Superman. Superman 2025, Lex Luthor. So it's about time that we get Brainiac, right? Like, he is a villain who can literally go toe-to-toe with Superman in terms of, like, strength, endurance, and he's way smarter than the Man of Steel. He's just way smarter. Superman could never outsmart Brainiac. Superman's not dumb. He's pretty smart. But Brainiac is like another level. This dude was like, he was able to like build the ship and leave his planet. I believe his planet also suffered a fate similar to Krypton. But dude, think about like just a normal person here on Earth being able to build their own spaceship and just fly away. You know what I mean? Like, this dude's incredibly smart. So I think it's about time we get Brainiac done well in a live action film. There was trouble production with the DCEU. I think they had wanted to go that route initially. They wanted to do Brainiac for a sequel, and then we all saw how it turned out. We got Batman v Superman instead of an actual Superman film with Brainiac, which would have been awesome. It would have been perfect. It was the perfect setup. And I'll tell you what they could have done, and they should have done for a Superman sequel. Actually, this didn't have to be a direct sequel. Maybe it could have been the third film where he's fighting Brainiac. But this would have been after a couple films with Flash, Aquaman, Wonder Woman, Shazam even. Those core members of the League in the New 52 universe. After a couple solo films, Superman fights Zod in the first film. Second film, good elements from Batman v Superman with Lex Luthor and the kryptonite bullet. He was developing this new bullet from this metal, which I believe they should have just made it metallo, the metal that he was using, the experimental metal, which that whole plot about these security contractors and using these bullets. I believe that could have been a great lead into metallo, testing out this metal, and then the thing with the import license to get kryptonite into the country. I could definitely see that evolving into like a plot where, okay, Metallo is this dude who he's got this invincible body. He's incredibly strong. And then you get the import license to get kryptonite into the country. And then you have the kryptonite core in Metallo's chest. And it's like, there's your villain right there for a Man of Steel sequel. That would give Superman a real challenge. That would have been awesome. So you could have had that going on, and then the other members could have had their films, and he has, trust in the League now that he's, seen all these other heroes. They've helped him, they've interacted, whatever the case may be. The League is formed. He trusts them to protect Earth while he's gone. And he has to leave, for this. This would be the idea for a third film, in my opinion. Again, I'm just talking about what the DCEU did back then. I think I mentioned this in one of my other videos, but, basically, this should have been the plot for a third film. He gets a distress call from the ancient Kryptonian, the scout ship. And, it's basically like a distress signal from a Kryptonian settlement. And basically, he has to go save them. I know the Kryptonian ship was like really damaged quite a bit after Zod crashed the ship with, after, Superman crashed his ship into it. And then we saw that Lex took control of that ship and Batman v Superman. But, maybe there were some actual escape pods, some smaller ships inside the huge Kryptonian ship. And he could have used this spaceship to actually get to the distress call on another world. And what you could have done is just have, he goes to this settlement. He sees that there are Kryptonians, there are people like him. And, they're living somewhat peacefully, or so it seems, until it's revealed that Brainiac is basically enslaving them, making them work and develop machines and technology for him. And, it all could have been a ploy to get Superman to him in order to use his DNA to make himself even stronger. Because Superman in Man of Steel has the Codex, which means he has all the DNA of every Kryptonian, which means the scholars, the warriors, whatever. He has a DNA from all of Krypton. So my idea was, okay, Brainiac lures Superman here because he wants that Codex for himself. That way he can unlock different powers of the Kryptonians, integrate it into his own biology and physiology, and become even better, become stronger. I believe that would have been a perfect way to introduce Brainiac and set him up as this badass villain who can give Superman a run for his money. He could have kryptonite weapons. It could have been an awesome film. And then, because this is the way I think of it, right? I have all these ideas of like what the DCEU could have been. He wanted the Codex because he was failing his experiments with trying to like clone Kryptonians. He didn't want, basically, let's say Brainiac is holding these people on this planet, these Kryptonians. He wants them as like slaves, basically. He wants them to be obedient. He would try to create his own Kryptonians that he could control, more easily. Let's say though these Kryptonians that he tried to clone were just not turning out the way he wanted, right? And you could have actually had a bizarro, a bizarro Superman, where Superman gets there and he's got like this henchman, like a failed experiment, and it's a bizarro Superman, and he has to fight Bizarro. And the reason he wants Superman's DNA, because it has the codex, is because he would be able to create perfect clones, perfect Kryptonian clones, and then he could, control them with mind control or whatever the case may be. So he could face off against Bizarro, he could defeat him, and then he could go toe-to-toe with Brainiac, maybe with some help of the other Kryptonians, he would succeed. Maybe the Kryptonians could, send him off world with like a secret ship that they built, maybe unbeknownst to Brainiac. And, he would promise to, come back for them. He can't save them right now, but, maybe he left this settlement and he promised to return after defeating Brainiac. With help from, maybe the League or somebody else, Green Lanterns, whatever the case may be. Brainiac could have set up a ploy to work with Mongol. So when Superman is leaving, he gets intercepted by Mongol, and he's forced to fight on Warworld. And then you could have had him meet. Hell, John Jones could have been on Warworld, and that's where he could have met John Jones. And he could have initially fought him, or if you want to go the JLA route, he could have fought Draga. And then eventually, in order for him to get free, he's got to fight Mongol and free himself, as well as the other prisoners on Warworld. Then he heads back to Earth. And by that time, Darkseid is already there. Now, that's why Darkseid came, because Superman is across the galaxy somewhere else. So after defeating Brainiac, he's headed to Earth, but he gets intercepted by Mongol, who has made a pact with Brainiac. Brainiac's contingency was, if I don't capture the Kryptonian, then Mongol will get him. So he fights Mongol in Warworld. He defeats him. But by the time he gets back to Earth, there's a parademon invasion, and the League are trying to fight off Darkseid. Superman arrives just in time to save the day and defeat Darkseid. And that is your Justice League film right there. I mean, I feel like I'm a genius for coming up with this plot of how the DCEU could have been. DC, you guys don't even have to pay me. I will work for you guys because I just love these characters. I will come up with these stories and these plots, and you guys just put them together. I feel like I'm a genius for coming up with these ideas. But anyway, that's my plan. That's what I would have done for DC. But anyway, now let's talk about Brainiac for the DCU, because this was all just what could have been with Brainiac, okay? But now let's talk about what they're actually going to do. Now, like I said, you gotta do this character right. He's incredibly intelligent, he's crafty, he's strong, he's durable, he's fast. He's a very advanced being. So we gotta introduce him in a way that is significant to the DCU. How they're gonna do that, I don't necessarily know. But I believe they're gonna do it probably in Supergirl, because Supergirl is like in production, filming already. They already have a release date, I think, so they're gonna add like a post-credit scene, and that's gonna set up Brainiac for the future films. So anyway, that was my little rant on James Gunn, the Superman saga, what the DCEU could have been with Brainiac, and where we're going now with the DCU and Brainiac in the future. So I'm excited, I'm stoked. I know all DC fans are stoked. Brainiac is a great villain, and he needs to be. We need to see all his brilliance and his abilities on full display in a sequel to where, this guy can really, really be set up as a formidable foe to the Man of Steel. So comment down below what you guys think of like my little fan fiction about Brainiac from the DCEU, what they could have done, and what they're going to do with Brainiac for the DCU. And then, yeah, just drop a comment. We'll have a discussion. And I'm really excited to see Brainiac in James Gunn's DCU.